Welcome to the Mama Bear Family Care Mastermind Summit. I'm Sherilyn and I'll be hosting the summit. Today we'll be talking to Jan Allegretti, who is trained in veterinary homeopathy and has more than 30 years experience as a consultant in holistic healthcare for non-human animals and more than 35 years as an advocate for compassionate care for all species. She is an author. Her latest book is The Fresh and Flexible Meal Plan, the easiest, most nutritious way to feed your dog and cat. Her other books are The Complete Holistic Dog Book, Home Health Care for Our Canine Companions, and Listen to the Silence, Lessons from Trees and Other Masters. So hi, Jen.
Hi,
Welcome.
Sherilyn. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this. It's really a wonderful project that you're working on here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's so exciting to get to talk to you. I've been listening to your interviews and reading some of your books, and you have a wealth of information, and I'm just really excited to dig into it. I've been learning so much.
Well, good. Well, good. I've enjoyed our conversations we've had so far, so I'm really looking forward to talking some more today.
Awesome. So you want to tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and your work that I may have missed in the intro?
You summarized it well. I've been doing this kind of work in various forms for a long time, for at least 35 years, and it has certainly evolved. I've always been connected to animals since I was very, very young. Had a very, very close bond to my first dog when I was 5 years old, and always wanted to be around horses, and ended up found my way to train horses for about 25 years. But then as I became more involved with animal advocacy work, I realized that I wanted a different relationship with the horses. Rather than training them and riding them, I just wanted to advocate for their well-being exclusively, which I had done all through my training career as well. But the focus was more on the advocacy. And so I stopped training, and I eventually even stopped riding completely. The last, I don't know, 15 years or so of my horses' lives, they lived fence-free up here on the hills and in California, and I didn't ride them at all. But I still had a really amazing relationship with them. And then I became more involved in community work as an advocate, and worked on a number of projects in that way. And then during the time that I was training horses, I had an opportunity to work with a veterinary homeopath, to apprentice with her for a couple of years. And that I had already been looking for ways to bring more natural form of care to the horses in my barn. And but through working with her, I was introduced to holistic medicine as well. And that just became a real passion of mine. And so it's been a focus of my work for a long time now, too.
Wow, that's beautiful. I love you that you've had a lifelong sort of love affair with animals.
Yeah, and it really is an evolution. I just have find over and over and over again that I'm always learning from them, from the animals who are in my own family, to clients that I work with, and other experiences that I have. There's just always another layer, another opportunity to go deeper, or to see a way to be more caring and more aware of their needs and who they are and how they express themselves, which is just so magical. And so it's a learning process. And I know that 10 years from now, I'll look back and say, boy, I've learned so much.
Yeah.
So it's an ongoing process.
Mm-hmm. So how did the idea to write your books come to you? How long have you been an author, and how did you come up with the idea for these last couple books?
Well, the last couple books, actually, the first one was the first of those two was an outgrowth. My first book was something that just came to me: Listen to the Silence, Lessons from Trees and Other Masters. And those were just inspiration that came to me from going out and walking on the land. I've always had a desire to spend a lot of time just out on the land, sitting in the dirt, walking on the land, being with the trees. And early on, when I came to California, which was 1991, I spent a lot of time doing that, and I would get these inspirations, this insights and things that I would learn just from sitting out there being quiet. And that became the first book, Listen to the Silence. from that, I began to work with an editor and do some editing myself. And the editor at the time invited me to, knew that I was also doing holistic healthcare. And a publisher he worked with wanted somebody to write a book about holistic care for dogs. And he asked me if I would be interested in that. And so that's how the first book came about. And then a big part of that book was the diet. And the diet has always, from the beginning, been a really important part of my consulting work and my teaching about how we can best care for the non-humans in our family. And so it became really clear that this approach to feeding that I've developed is really unique. It's different from the way we've all been taught to feed up until now. And so as I began to work with a lot of clients myself and see the changes in my own animals and get feedback from veterinarians who I have taught who are now using this approach, I just realized that I really needed to have a book just about the diet to go out there and to be available so people could take that one short topic and focus on that and as a starting point for better health for their animals.
Wonderful, because diet is such a powerful foundation for humans and as well as animals, right?
It absolutely is. It's so essential to physical health. It really is the foundation of physical health. In addition, first and foremost, I think is a safe, minimally stressful, loving, caring environment, home environment. But very soon after that, the diet is really a starting point. And so physical health, for physical health, it's necessary, but it's also, food is emotion as well. The food is largely tied into our culture, to our traditions, our emotions, a way that we care for one another as humans, and certainly as the way we care for the dogs and cats and horses and whatever other species happen to be in our family. And so it really is a healing modality for every part of our being and every part of our relationship.
Mm-hmm. I love that you brought in that emotional aspect too, because a lot of times we hear, well, food is just for nourishment and it shouldn't be an emotional thing, and I understand that you can go overboard and stuff, but there's definitely, all I needed to know about whether or not food is supposed to have a healthy connection to our emotions is the fact that we breastfeed when we're babies. In animals, it's integral to our nourishment, is one and the same as comforting and being emotionally nourished from the time we're babies. And so that's, to me, what nature is telling us, is that is inherently part of what food is about. And I love how you talk about the potential to transform our relationships with our animal friends. And I love a quote that you have on your website. It says, we are not their owners. They're not our property. And I've noticed that you don't use the term pets. You use the term companion animals. So can you share why you use that term and what kind of differences this shift in terminology makes?
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I do think it's a really important way to understand our relationship and to be really realistic about our relationship and to change it potentially. The notion of, we very commonly call ourselves owners of the owner of that dog, the owner of the cat, the owner of the horse, or whoever. But when you think of ownership, I own the chair here in my living room. And because I own that chair, I can sit on it. I can throw it away if I don't want it. I can chop it up and use it for firewood. I can do whatever I want to do with it. And the chair doesn't have any say in that, really. That's not the relationship that most of us don't have, that kind of relationship with our dogs or our cats in our family, and yet we call ourselves owners. And so I think that, having worked in animal advocacy for a long time, early on, I had the sense that how can we really make a difference? Because there's so many different ways that humans exploit other species, whether it's through habitat destruction or outright abuse of being cruel to animals, or putting them in circuses, confining them in cages in a zoo, or putting them in a horse race where they are subjected to physical stress at a young age. All the different ways that we exploit and take advantage of other species can be tied to the notion of ownership. Because we own another being, then we justify the things that we do that are not in their best interest. And so if we can break the habit of calling ourselves owners and recognize that what we really want to be is a guardian or a caregiver, or a companion, or some people use the term pet parent, it's more of a nurturing and caring relationship. And so that's why I think the term guardian or caregiver is preferable. And the other flip side of that is the notion of pets versus companions. A pet is sort of a plaything. When you really think about what that term means, it's more of a plaything or a toy or something you can put on a shelf and kind of do with what we want to do. Whereas a companion is somebody who engages in a mutual relationship with it, more of an equitable relationship. I have to mention too, there was a very, very wise animal advocate who I think brought a bit of genius to the whole animal advocacy movement. His name was Elliot Katz, and he was a veterinarian who founded the organization In Defense of Animals many, many years ago. He's no longer with us, unfortunately, but he is the one who, that's where that phrase you mentioned, "We are not their owners, they are not our property," came from.
Oh.
He instituted what we call the Guardian Campaign, where he was the one who had the idea that we should change the way we talk about our relationship, because our language has power. The terms that we use have meaning and help us identify who we are and how we relate. And so Dr. Elliot Katz was a very wise man who is responsible for shifting the thinking of a lot of us in that way.
Oh, wow. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's very, very wise, very inspiring. One of the most inspiring things I've encountered in my long journey.
Yes, I've been reading a book lately about different kinds of thinking, and it just shocks me that it's even been a debate whether or not animals have emotions in the science community over the years, that people even have to think about it.
Oh, yeah.
Do they have consciousness? Do they have emotions? And it seems so common sense to me, to anyone who's spent any time with a dog or a cow or a pig or, cats, even if it's a little bit different than our consciousness, it's, they definitely have emotions.
Yeah. Well, that's so true. It's there are these assumptions that are made. We like to think that it's been a very, very long time since we acknowledge that animals do have emotions, but as you say, it's really not that. It's not a settled question in some circles, and even within certain species, there's more acknowledgement. I think in some communities where like the scientific community maybe dogs have emotions. I mean, but still you see studies. I've seen studies recently where do dogs really remember somebody they haven't seen in 6 months? Well, of course they do,
Right.
But the thing is too that it's not just dogs and cats. It's not just the ones who share our homes. It's cows, it's pigs, birds, chickens, fish even. And now, there's a study recently that bees have emotions. Bees laugh, they
My
have
goodness.
all in, there's a species of spiders who stroke their young when they're in distress. Now, it's hard we can't read their faces like we can read a lot of other species, but why would a mother spider stroke her babies, when they're distressed, if not there's some sense of wanting to comfort? So, I mean, all species want to live. They all want to have life. They all have relationships. Mother cows, when they're separated from their babies so that we can take her milk to make ice cream, or cheese, they both cry, they holler. It's traumatic for them, just like it is for any other species when they're separated. So you're right. I mean, the notion that other species don't have emotions or don't have consciousness, those are just assumptions that we make, I think, in a lot of ways, because it makes it a little easier to do the things that we're accustomed to doing with them.
Yes, definitely. And we're just so we overthink things, I think, as humans. I mean, a
Sometimes I
child,
think
no.
we have these wonderful complex cognitive brains, but sometimes I think the complexity gets in our way. We're such busy thinkers that you're right. We just
Yeah.
spend too much time in our brains and don't drop into our heart and our intuition to see what's in front of us.
Mm-hmm. And so you've focused on holistic care for animals as opposed to can you talk to us about what that means, what holistic care for animals means?
Sure. It's very much what it sounds like. It's looking at the whole animal, not just physical, not just a particular body part or organ system, but it's looking at the whole body as a unit. So in other words, if a dog has a skin rash, we don't just treat the skin, we look at the whole body to see what's going on internally, emotionally, physically, in the environment even. Are there chemicals in the environment that could be causing this? You look at the big picture rather than just one isolated body part. But we also look at the emotional life of the animal. We look at their spirituality. We look at the environment. Those all play a really, really big part in physical health. And so it makes sense to look at the big picture when we're dealing with issues and keeping them healthy as well as treating problems. But holistic care also involves using medicines that work with the whole animal as well. So rather than take a pharmaceutical that treats just a particular symptom or just one particular illness, we use herbs and food and homeopathy and lifestyle changes so that we do treat the whole animal. It just as while we're looking at the big picture to see what's wrong, we have medicines that can treat them on that level as well. And what we find is that those types of medicines, those natural medicines, they're much gentler because they work with the animal to heal. We all have a very powerful natural tendency to heal. And so holistic medicine works with that tendency to support it and nurture the healing process. Whereas very often what we call allopathic medicine, or the conventional medicines that we see in the scientific community or from the pharmaceutical companies, they tend to suppress symptoms. When you're fighting an infection, you may have a fever. And the conventional thinking is we'll take an aspirin to suppress that fever. But but the fever is there for a reason. It's because the virus or the bacteria that's infecting your body does not thrive at a higher temperature. And so the fever is one way to help suppress that, help to kill that for your body, to help to fight that infection. And so now, obviously, if you have 106-degree fever, Cheryl, we're not going to let you suffer and not bring that fever down. But if you have a very low-grade fever, we might let that run its course a little bit and let your body heal itself and give you medicines that will support you while you go through that process. So it's more a matter of helping your body to heal itself rather than suppressing symptoms that your body needs in order to heal at a deeper level.
Interesting. Thank you for that explanation. So what are some of the benefits to treating issues that way as opposed to the conventional way?
There are a lot of benefits. One way to really identify that, and my first very clear recognition of that, as I mentioned, I was introduced to homeopathic medicine when I was training horses. And at the time I had a 34 stall barn filled with horses, and I had a dog and a few barn cats and a pygmy goat named Emma. And there was a lot of animals there. And so we had the vets out on a regular basis. Every week, every 2 weeks anyway, there was a vet coming to treat somebody who was sick. There was always something going on. But I found that when I began using homeopathy instead of the conventional medicines, that the animals didn't get sick as often. We didn't see the vets nearly as often. I mean, there's a place for conventional medicine. If somebody is seriously ill, there are times when conventional medicines are helpful, but we just didn't see as much illness. Everybody stayed healthier. The horses weren't colicking as much. There wasn't as much lameness. And so there just wasn't as much need for intervention at all. So that demonstrated to me that the homeopathic treatments were elevating the overall health of the individual. And that's very clearly true on a far greater scale than what I saw in my barn. That holistic care supports the overall health of the individual so that they're less prone to becoming sick. Just like when you improve the diet of your dog or your cat at home, your veterinary bills will go way down, because so many of the problems that cause you to feel that you need treatment can be addressed by improving the diet. So that's one thing, that the health overall improves. Another really important factor is that we see far fewer side effects. Most of the pharmaceutical drugs that we use that are in wide use have long lists of potential side effects that may only happen to a fairly small percentage, but most of them, because they're suppressive, the disease process doesn't just go away when you take the symptom away. Sometimes we say it goes deeper into the body, we find, and so that it can come out, and it has to come out in some other way. So we see more long-term illness with the suppressive medicines of conventional care. But we also see a lot more side effects on a more immediate basis, on a short-term and on a long-term basis. The holistic medicines tend to cause far fewer side effects. One of the reasons for that is because they work synergistically with the natural healing process of the animal, as we talked about before. Plus, it's a whole food, it's a whole plant medicine in general. If you take a whole herb, St. John's wort is a commonly used herb. A lot of people use it to help treat depression. In fact, it has been found to be as effective as, for many people, as Prozac for treating depression or other antidepressive medications. And so in the pharmaceutical world, any one of us can go and plant a St. John's wort plant in our backyard and use that for medicine. But pharmaceutical companies don't make any money that way. And also just with the conventional Western medicine thinking, the idea is, well, let's figure out what's in that plant that's making people feel better. Right. So they find that, well, there's an ingredient called hypericin that is in the St. John's wort plant. And they isolate that ingredient, and that does help to some degree. But there are also hundreds and hundreds of other components in that St. John's wort plant that help to soften the effects of the hypericin. They help to modulate the way it acts in the body. They help to prevent side effects. They help with the overall healing process, so that the plant isn't just targeting that one symptom of depression, it's helping the whole body to heal. St. John's wort has many, many other medicinal properties in addition to helping with depression, but you lose those when you isolate out one ingredient from the plant. So the whole plant, it's a long way of saying the whole plant is much more protective of the body, much less likelihood of side effects with any of these medicines. And so I shouldn't say with any natural plant, that's not necessarily true, but any of the medicines commonly used for holistic care are generally far less likely to have side effects and far more likely to support overall health and well-being for the long term.
That's so interesting. I could talk to you about that subject all day because I'm also passionate about plant medicine. I love essential oils, and I've learned a lot about them, and I've learned that even some of the scientists in these essential oil companies, being trained as scientists, their tendency is to try to compartmentalize that too, and ask themselves which components, which constituents are doing what, right. But they've learned through their experience that, like you explained it perfectly about how all of the constituents work together synergistically and counterbalance each other and also increase the effectiveness.
Mhm.
But one other thing that I've noticed is that they often, when we have a symptom, say a runny nose or something, whether it's humans or animals,
Mhm.
I'm trying not to use medical terminology too much, but say seasonal issues with watery eyes or runny nose, itchiness, we might use something like Benadryl, or if you want to go a natural route, you would use lavender, right? And one thing that I notice is both of those things are also calming. Benadryl can make you go to sleep. Lavender can make you go to sleep.
Mhm.
They're calming, and also sometimes when people get nervous, they start itching with hives or something, and so
Right.
it just got me to notice that a lot of times, we're raised in this culture to think in terms of one symptom, like one pill for one symptom, but the symptom is the body's way of telling us that there's an imbalance, right? And so often when we use the whole plant, um, that ends up helping to balance out other issues that may not have become symptoms yet, because it mirrors the need that our body has, right? So
Exactly right.
yeah,
Yes.
so that would work that way with animals too, I would
Ab-
think.
Absolutely. It's very much the same. And you put it very well, when you say that it's, we see one symptom, but it means there are other things going on as well, besides just what we see. And so if we only treat what is immediately on the surface, we miss a lot of other things and reduce the possibility of true healing. I had a
Right.
really interesting experience with that last year, just about this time. Well, actually, a year ago in March, I adopted a 10-year-old boxer dog.
Uh,
Oh gosh, what a love he was. Is he was he was found as a stray, so nobody really knew his history. He had been in foster care with a wonderful, wonderful foster mom. She was just magnificent with him, and I really treasured the way she cared for him and the way all she did for him. He had a habit of licking his paws. Um, so much so by the time he came to me, he had terrible yeast infections because when they lick their paws all the time, it's always wet. And so in that moist environment, the yeast infection grows. It was so bad that his toenails were dark red because they
mm,
turn color that way sometimes when there's a severe yeast infection. And she had been trying to treat it, but what the doctors were telling her to do was to give him Benadryl, to say to
mm,
come, because they assumed it was an allergy. Well, maybe it's his food or his diet, or maybe it's because he's walking, something that he's walking on that outside that's causing him to have this allergic
mm,
reaction, make him lick his feet. When he came to me, he and I just wasn't quite convinced that that was the problem. And so I remember the first time, one of the first afternoons, he was sitting on the couch and he was licking, and I went over and I just sat down next to him. He came over to me and he leaned deeply into my chest, through his body into my heart, and he
oh,
stopped licking. And I just sat there with him and I held him and we talked and we cuddled, and he didn't lick the whole time I sat there with him.
mm,
So I kept doing that. When he would start to lick, I would go and give him attention, and I would just give him the emotional support that he needed. Anyway, over time, it turned out I never did give him Benadryl. I did give him some valerian to help him relax, with the whole herb.
mhm,
Um, but the licking eventually stopped. I also did some homeopathic remedies with him that help him with his emotional trauma that I knew he had been through. But the licking stopped. He didn't need Benadryl. It wasn't an allergy. That was his way of handling his stress. And so this is one of the ways that
mm,
if we take time and step back and look at what's really going on in the big picture. I knew his history. He had been found as a stray and big city of Sacramento, and yet he was clearly a dog who had lived with somebody because he knew all those house manners and all of that.
Yeah.
So it's a really good example of just what you're saying, is that there's something else going on underneath. If we just treat the symptom we see, we miss a chance to heal what's really going on.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I love that. I have two questions in my head right now. I'm trying to, well, just maybe real quick, because we just passed July 4th, I was I was thinking of all the dogs in the neighborhood who were suffering, and just really quickly, if you can, what would you do for dogs who are around fireworks? We have fireworks at least twice a year with 4th of July and New Year's in America anyway. And what are some of the best things to do during that time that you would recommend for dogs?
You know, though for most animals, I mean, there are some animals who have a past history with loud noises, and that's a different kind of an issue. But for vast majority of cases, it's just a situational thing. A loud noise is frightening, and they don't know where it's coming from, and they feel the vibrations, and it's really an acute problem. It's not a deep-seated emotional trauma for many of them. And so for an acute basis, there are a number of things. One thing is to, of course, make sure they're safe and don't leave them out in the yard where they could try to run away and get lost. Another thing is to try to be with them and be close with them and not leave them home alone while you go out and watch the fireworks, when they're going to be scared at home alone. Other things are to minimize the noise, close the windows, turn the TV up nice and loud, or the radio, play some loud music. Be in an upbeat, happy mood yourself to let them know that, yes, oh, listen, there's a noise, but I'm still happy, and they can read that and understand that, okay, maybe this isn't it's something I need to be afraid of. And so you're educating them too about that this isn't an immediate threat to them. And then there are some holistic treatment medicines that you can use as well. Again, valerian is one of those that can be really helpful. It's a really good calming herb. And it's pretty potent. It has a pretty strong effect, and it can overcome a lot of those kinds of fears. And so you can give them the valerian. In a real severe case, you can give melatonin along with it, a very, very, very low dose of melatonin. A lot of people use that to help with sleep, but in many cases, we use a lot more than we need. Just tiny, tiny microdoses are all that's really needed. So those in combination can be very helpful. And I have actually found too that in cases where we can get a dog through one or two of those events where there are fireworks without the stress. So in other words, it's 4th of July, and about 8 o'clock, the noise is going to start to go off. So before that starts, you give them the valerian and you help them to stay calm through the experience. And now, they may have had several years of listening to fireworks and being panicked. So they hear the fireworks and they remember the panic, and that starts the cycle. If instead you can give them the experience of being calm while the fireworks are going on, you can change their relationship to that trigger, to that fear trigger. And so you may find after a few cycles of that you don't need to treat it anymore, that, oh yeah, there's those fireworks again, but I know that we played last time I heard fireworks and I wasn't scared. So they can get past that.
Okay. Thank you. Do you ever use essential oils? Because with my friend's dog, we use frankincense and lavender. Do you ever use essential oils in your practice with animals?
I do, but fairly minimally. Dogs and cats are so much more sensitive to essential oils than we are. I mean, dogs, as we know, their sense of smell is so much more powerful than ours. Right. And so very, very small amounts are effective. And I do use them, but I try to stay away from the really highly aromatic things like mint and eucalyptus and
for sure. Yeah.
Those kinds of things. But something like lavender or I say sandalwood is a nice calming one. Those kinds of things. they can be helpful. And frankincense is actually very, very wonderful, helping to fight tumors, and interesting enough as well, and for skin problems. But again, in very, very well diluted and in small amounts, and nothing around the face. Cats especially, you need to be very, very careful with, because their bodies don't process the fragrances as well as ours do in some cases, and they can there's greater likelihood of that they'll be toxic. So it's good to work with somebody who has a lot of experience with essential oils for the species you're working with before you do a lot of
Yeah.
energy.
Thank you for that. And learning which oils especially are safe for dogs,
Right.
and which we want to probably stay away from, and also likewise for cats. And
Right.
then make sure it's a super high quality one that's not adulterated, and then also make sure that the space is ventilated, and that the animal can leave the room where the essential oils
Yes.
are if they want to, right?
Very, very important. Very good point. Yes.
Jan has generously provided for a free gift for you all, and we'll have a link here on the page where you can access that free gift to get started right away with some of the things that she's been talking about. And Jen, can you let us know and let the audience know where they should go to find out more about your work?
Sure. My website is at holisticaha.com. Holistic AHA stands for Holistic Animal Health and Advocacy, but you don't have to type that all out. Just holisticaha.com.
And remember to check out Jan's books. Her latest book is The Fresh and Flexible Meal Plan, the easiest, most nutritious way to feed your dog and cat. Her other books are The Complete Holistic Dog Book, Home Health Care for Our Canine Companions, and Listen to the Silence, Lessons from Trees and Other Masters.